All right, today we're jumping into a really fascinating question. How in the world do you solve a massive debt without having to sell off your most valuable assets? We're going to break down a real-world system designed to do exactly that. Let's get into it. So here's the big problem. Imagine you are staring down a $500,000 obligation. Now, the usual route? It's a fire sale. You're selling your property, your investments, your nest egg. But what if there was another way? A way to settle that debt while actually keeping your core assets safe and maybe even letting them grow? That's the high-stakes puzzle we're going to solve today. To navigate a world this complex, you don't just need a map. You really need an architect, someone who can literally restructure the very foundation of the deal. And this is where a very specific and, believe me, very powerful role comes into play. Meet the Lex Node Operator, or LNO for short. Now, try not to think of them as a banker. Think of them more like a financial architect. They have a fiduciary duty, and that's a legal term meaning they are obligated to act in your best interest. And their whole job is to design and operate these new kinds of commercial systems, anchoring everything to real, verifiable assets. So, how do they build such a rock-solid system? Well, this slide basically shows you the fortress they create. First, they use something called the Uniform Commercial Code, which is the rulebook for pretty much all commerce in the US, to build an ironclad legal foundation. But the real key here is what's called ex-ante engineering. See, instead of suing someone after a contract is broken, they build the system so that a breach is structurally impossible right from the start. And finally, every single step is locked in as evidence on the notary chain. Think of it like a secure, unchangeable digital notary stamp. Okay, so how does this whole process actually kick off? Well, it all starts by unlocking the hidden value in a very familiar asset, and then transforming it into something way more powerful. In our case study, the client has a $300,000 term life insurance policy. Now, for most of us, this is just a piece of paper, right? A promise for the future. But in this system, it's the raw material for our entire solution. And this slide shows that transformation perfectly. First, the LNO frames the policy with a special legal agreement. This converts that simple insurance policy into something called trust-owned life insurance, or TOLI. But that final step, that's the most important. This process legally turns the policy into a controllable electronic record. It's kind of like digitizing your house deed. It is now a first-class digital asset under commercial law, and that gives the client true, verifiable control over its value. So now, with this powerful digital asset in hand, the client can tap into a really unique form of liquidity. And this isn't your typical bank loan. This is an engine specifically designed to completely eliminate risk for the lender. It's called 235% non-recourse funding. It's simple, really. To get a loan, you have to provide collateral that's worth 235% of the loan amount. This over-collateralization means the lender takes on literally zero risk. And the non-recourse part means they can't come after your other personal assets if something goes wrong. The collateral is the whole deal. Okay, let's look at the actual numbers. To get the settlement started, our client needs a specific asset, a gold-backed box that's valued at $50,000. So using that 235% model, they need to post just over $117,000 in collateral. And here is where it all clicks together. Remember that newly tokenized $300,000 insurance policy? Well, it more than covers that requirement. So the system issues a $50,000 draw to go buy the gold-backed box, and all the while, the client's insurance equity just stays safely parked in the trust. So we've got the tokenized asset. We've got the funding for the gold-backed box. Now we get to the most powerful part of this whole thing, the settlement itself. This is where the financial alchemy happens, and that $500,000 debt gets completely wiped out. Now, the key to understanding what happens next is a huge shift in how you think. Like the quote says, it's about being value-centric. So for a second, just forget about the fluctuating market price of an asset, like gold. Instead, focus on its agreed-upon value for a specific purpose inside a legally defined ecosystem. So what's a gold-back actually worth? Well, on the open market, it's got a spot price that goes up and down. But inside this private, legally constructed ecosystem, its value isn't set by the market. No, it's set by policy, an agreed-upon trust-backed value that can be exponentially higher. This internal agreement, legally perfected by the LNO and backed by real assets in the trust, well, that's the secret sauce that makes the whole settlement possible. And this is the moment that changes everything. That $50,000 box of goldbacks, when it's used for settlement inside this specific legal architecture, can suddenly command an internal value of around $2.5 million. It is a massive multiplier effect, and it's not created by market speculation, but by the legally binding agreements and the asset backing of the trust. So how does the debt actually get paid? It's with something called an atomic flash loan. The client just swipes their card. In that instant, the system borrows $500,000 in regular US dollars to pay the creditor, and in the exact same instant, it repays that loan using just a fraction of the Goldback box's $2.5 million internal policy value. The whole thing happens and is settled in a single, indivisible step. It's incredible. So the debt is gone. The core asset is still there. Let's take a look at the final outcome and just see how totally transformative this process really is. This table just perfectly sums up the win-win here. The client's goal is to get rid of debt, and their outcome is that their assets get to keep compounding. Meanwhile, the L&O, who architects the whole thing, performs all the necessary legal actions, like the jurat ceremony, which is a formal notarial act to create a fully compliant, regulator-ready audit trail for the whole transaction. And when you run the numbers, this value-centric approach gives you a 500% efficiency gain compared to the old way of just liquidating your assets to pay a debt. It's a fundamentally different and just way more powerful model. So let's just recap the final score here. The $500,000 debt is gone. The client's $300,000 insurance policy is still theirs, free and clear, and it's continuing to grow. They've literally shifted from being a debtor to a sovereign agent who's in control of their own financial system, settling debts in fiat currency while preserving their real asset-backed wealth. And all of that leaves us with one final, pretty mind-bending question. This whole system works because it proves that value can be a matter of internal policy enforced by code and law, instead of just the whims of an external market. If that's true, what other rules of finance are about to completely change? Something to think about.